It's Cardboard Time, episode number 132, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, I have reviews of All In Predictions and Squirrel Away. And Charlie has just decided to join me up here, so everyone say hi to Charlie that's listening. Very welcome guest. It's very nice. So let's talk about the Shelf of Aspiration. It is at 131. That is up by one since last time we talked. We need to be careful because it's going to surpass the episode count once again if I don't get some stuff played. But two new games incoming to the collection. The first one, a review copy of A Familiar Find that is by the folks at Darrington Press. So this one was a review copy that I requested after I saw it at Gamma. I'm very interested to take a look at it. The other game that I got was from crowdfunding, actually, and somebody that we've talked to on the show, Emily Vincent. That is Pirates of the High Teas arrived, and I'm looking forward to playing this one as well. I haven't gotten a full play of it in. I've only gotten a demo play, so excited to play the full thing and the final version. One game that I did get played was Mistborn, the deck building game by Brotherwise. I will be talking about that on a episode coming up very soon. And that's all I have for the Shelf of Aspiration. I feel like this episode is going to be a fairly quick one today, but I did want to touch base with y'all. So, a couple of reviews for you. The first one being All In Predictions. This is 2 to 5 players, produced in 2026. 25 minutes, designed by Phil Walker Harding. The art is by Dan Gartman, published by Next Move Games. In All In Predictions, players become gifted foretellers vying to shape destiny itself. Combine hand management with strategic foresight in this fast-paced game inspired by classic poker in which only one prediction will unfold. Play cards, bend probabilities, and guess who holds the strongest hand to claim the pot. In this game, players will start with a hand of 5 cards. There is a central display where after playing a card and resolving its effects, players will add the card to the display. Effects range from drawing cards from the top of the deck, swapping cards with the display, to simply taking point tokens. When the display is filled up, players will place their prediction token on the player they thought had the best hand. Players who predict accurately split a prediction pot, and everybody will also get points based on their hand rank at the end of the round. The player with the most points at the end of 3 rounds is the winner. So first of all, thanks to Asmodee for the review copy of this. I did play this first at PAX Unplugged, and we actually wound up staying at that table to play Down Up, and this was a little filler that we also got to play in conjunction with Down Up. We got to try it twice, and we wanted to give it some more time, and we got to do that. And I wanted to take a look at it a little bit more and give it some more plays and see what I thought of it after a few more times playing. So, on the trend of Texas Hold'em based games where you're trying to predict your opponent's hands, this one is competitive. This is not cooperative in a game like The Gang. That one's more cooperative. This is competitive. The predictive nature of the game is there. It's definitely a component of the game, but the most fun that I had with this was actually the hand and central display management. So there's basically this timer in how the central board works, where you're putting the cards that you've played, and players are also able to manipulate that somewhat, depending on if they pass. There is a all-in mechanic where you can actually continue to add cards when it's your turn, and then you accelerate the game. But it's almost always marching forward, and it's basically a timer. Once that fills up, everybody's going to see what they have. So the other thing that I noticed is the better the hand that you have, the harder it is to get it perfect. You want that perfect card that's going to score you a lot of points. and you can get close, but you can't quite get there because you have to play cards to once every round to get an ability, and usually the better cards that you're playing, the better the ability that they are. So it's really fascinating. You have a lot of options where you have nothing in your hand, but once you close down on that hand that you really want, it's really tough to perfect. And I really like that and the hand management aspect of that. So, more often than not, you could get a really good sense of who had the strongest hand from the predictive element of this game. I didn't really feel as much tension as I wanted to with that, especially after repeated plays. You knew, hey, this person has the best hand. This person definitely doesn't have anything. So you were able to pretty easily tell, in my experience, especially once you have a few plays under your belt, who was going to have that. And it didn't feel as tense as I would like it to. But I feel like this was a little bit more tending towards that hand management style of game. This is pretty easy to teach. The symbology on the cards does take a little bit to get used to for players. Once you do get used to it, it's fairly straightforward, but it does take a little bit of time to figure out, okay, what does this mean? What does that mean? And so on and so forth. I could really take or leave the name. This was a name for a game that I thought was fine, but we actually kept forgetting the name of the game when we were trying to refer to it. And in a market where there's a ton of games that really stand out, that are excellent, the name really doesn't do anything for us. And one thing that maybe could be improved. We did really like the artwork. It was weird and interesting and quirky, quasi-futuristic, but mythical at the same time. You'd have to see it to get what I mean about that, but I did really like the artwork on that. I did also like the fact that there's a variant that switches up some of the hand ranks. It does keep things a little bit fresher, so you're able to see some changes in that, and it makes the game a little bit more fresh so that you're not playing the exact same game all the time. I do think that this game does play best between 3 to 5. I do have a slight preference towards 3 to 4. That keeps the game going, it keeps it rolling, and you might be able to get a second game in once you get that first game in. 5 does tend to maybe drag slightly, and I will say that the 2-player variant is okay. It works. But for me, it's not preferred. I feel like I want the interaction with a couple of other players in the mix. So from a vision and accessibility standpoint, there is a small use of color to denote where you would take the cards from between the central display and the draw deck. It was very distinguishable. There was no issues that I had with color vision. One was light, one was dark, so it was very easy to tell those apart. The player tokens didn't really come into effect all that much. There was a little bit of a issue determining between the two, but you weren't using them for anything that you would necessarily need to know what color anything was. You would see all the players placing their predictive tokens, which had the colors on them, in front of the players. So for me, that was not an issue as well, but they were a little bit closer. So for my final thoughts, this is definitely a game that's best used as a filler game. It will hit for the right audience. If you really want that predictive aspect of a game like this and the gang, I would lean more towards the gang. That is going to give you a better predictive kind of experience. But if you want a game that leans a little bit more heavily on the hand and board management aspects of more of a gamified poker, this is a game that I would recommend checking out. The gang doesn't really do anything for hand management. You're just doing that predictive element, and here you have some agency, and that's what I really liked about this, was being able to figure out, okay, what hand am I working to? What's on the board? What can I make out of this? Maybe I'll take a risk and try to get this next super great hand. Or maybe I'll try to get a mediocre hand and just rush the end so nobody else has anything to get them points. I thought that was really cool. If you like a game like that, I would recommend checking this one out, especially for a filler. I think that does that really well. It's sticking around on my shelves for that reason, and that is All In Predictions. And the other game that I have to talk about today is Squirrel Away. This is from 2025. 3 to 6 players, 20 to 30 minutes, designed by Clarence Simpson. The art is by David D. Pasquale, and the publisher on this one is Floodgate Games. You and your ragtag crew of squirrely thieves just pulled off the biggest heist of your bushy-tailed lives, grabbing a whole winter's worth of acorns back from the clutches of a greedy raccoon. Now you're at the rendezvous point, up to your cheeks in nuts, and it's time to split up the haul. To get away with more than your fair share, it'll take some sneaky sleight of paw and every underhanded trick you can think of. Will you successfully scurry off with the biggest pile of acorns, or will another rogue rodent call you out as a scoundrel? In each round of Squirrel Away, a player will pick a card that determines what they're allowed to take, then grab acorn gems from the middle of the table, possibly sneakily grabbing more than they should, or acorns other than the ones indicated. They then claim to the group how many they grabbed, and the players decide whether that player is telling the truth, that is, squirreling away what they took, or if they're a scoundrel, taking something that they're not supposed to. In the end, the player who squirrels away the most sets, that is, one gem of each color, wins. So thank you to Floodgate Games for providing me a review copy of this as well. I did really like the theme of morally questionable squirrels trying to divvy up loot, and I was also very attracted to the components as well, and that kind of sleight of hand mechanic that this has. The production is absolutely lovely. Again, those chunky acorns, they feel great to pick up. They're very textured. So if you're a fan of those big chunky components that have a good feel to them, you'll enjoy this. So there is a bit of randomness in the cards. So sometimes you're able to exactly get what you need without lying, and you don't have to work that hard, but sometimes you've really got to work for it, especially when you're close to finishing some sets and just need that last component. Somebody's pretty much going to call you out no matter what. If you're not a fan of randomness, there is definitely some of that in here, and you have to work towards making sure that you get what you need at times, and sometimes it just falls right in your lap. This did take us a little bit longer than the posted 30-minute upper limit. I feel like this is a 25-minute game with the 3 people. It'll click, it'll go really fast. But when you have that full complement of 6, I felt like this was maybe more like 45, and it maybe dragged a little bit towards that top end. I did really appreciate in this game that people were engaged at all times. This was one of those games that you had to watch your opponents. With the game, especially at the start, once players ran out of scoundrel tokens, and this was one thing that I did notice in my plays, was that everybody was running out of scoundrel tokens almost immediately. They were going through them. Once they ran out, they weren't able to really call out the players, and they weren't necessarily really interested in what was going on. They just said, I can't call you out, so whatever. There was a little bit of that when other players had tokens. Players were able to goad those other players with tokens into calling somebody out as well. I think from an engagement standpoint, the lower player counts, which is counterintuitive, were actually the better player counts to play this at, for us anyways, on what we saw. This is going to be a game that is very specific for what group that you get it out with. The people who won't play along with the game's kind of cheeky nature are going to drag everyone else's experience down with them. You need to play this with people who are willing to play along, who are willing to get excited. And I think that groups that like a louder, more boisterous game are going to get way more enjoyment out of this game. And that's where I think that it really shines, is people who like the games with sleight of hand, who are really willing to get into it, who are going to pick up the acorn tokens and put them down and pick some more up and do some crazy things. I feel like those groups are really going to enjoy this quite a bit. From a vision and accessibility standpoint, this is one area that I do have to give this game a ding. For me, the yellow and green tokens, especially in lower light conditions, actually looked nearly identical to me. It did trip me up a couple of times during our game of this, and that was very unfortunate because I feel like for me, more or less, I'm going to be playing this in a lower light condition. I'm going to be playing this later at night, possibly when I'm not fully there mentally. So I feel like this is a big ding to the game for me especially. So for my final thoughts, this, in my opinion, two groups that I would really call out that I think would really enjoy this game quite a bit. Kids and their parents, I think, would have a lot of fun with this game. Or the late at night crowd, especially if you've had a few beverages, you're into something that's silly, you're looking to play something that's a little bit louder, more accusatory. Those are the kinds of groups that I think will have a lot of fun. And the more fun that you have with the bluffing aspect and the better that all the players are at the table with their sleight of hand, the more fun this game is going to be. I think that the aforementioned groups are going to be best at doing that. Maybe not necessarily kids, but especially that late at night crew, I think, is going to really enjoy this most. Since when I'd be playing this, it's going to be an environment with a lower amount of light later at night. The exception to that might be a convention where I'd have to be in the hall and playing it so I could see those tokens at a moment's notice. And I do have that issue telling between the green and the yellow acorns. I do think that I'm going to pass this one off, but I will be giving it to a group of folks that I think will get some definite playtime and more out of it than I will. This one's going to be leaving my shelves. But again, if you like that sleight of hand gameplay, I think that you will really enjoy this. And it's a good game for the players who really enjoy that kind of game. So that was Squirrel Away. And I think that'll do it for us today. This one is a shorter episode, but I think that the next one is probably going to be a little bit longer, and I should be returning to an interview segment. So I'm very excited about that and looking forward to bringing you some more interviews. We are definitely looking at booking some more this year and getting back into that. I know that I've been a little bit lax over the winter. So anyways, if you want to know more about Cardboard Time, you can go to cardboardtime.com. The Instagram is at cardboard_time. The Blue Sky is at Cardboard Time. The Discord is on the Tabletop Express server. You can email me at cardboardtime@gmail.com. or go to the website for an invite to that, a lovely community over there. Any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, you can email me at cardboardtime@gmail.com and drop those in there. And for the LGBTQ plus community, things are tough right now, but the world is better with you in it. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around the table in 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time.